Welcome to Experience Talks Online, a series of exclusive podcasts on our website featuring talented, creative people with experience worth talking about. I'm Cynthia Friedlob. Today, John Semper Jr. talks with our guest, vocalist Jerry LAWSON.
Melody, 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 melody. He was a famous trumpet man from out Chicago way. He had a boogie sound that no one else could play. He was a top man in his craft. But then his drummer came up and he was gone with the track. He's in the army now, blowing reveille. He's the boogie woogie bugle boy in Company B.
You're listening to some of the very best a cappella music. The term a cappella was first used in Italian Catholic churches, where Latin was the language for sacred text. A cappella in Latin literally meant in the manner of the chapel. Eventually, when applied specifically to music, the term came to describe anything performed, as was the music of the church, without instrumental accompaniment. In America in the 1950s and 60s, the term a cappella was adopted by young urban street corner singers as they performed their versions of popular songs of the day without the means to hire musicians to back them up. In the 1970s, a new wave of popularity for a cappella music was started thanks to the highly successful record albums of a group known as The Persuasions. They had begun singing together in Brooklyn, New York in the mid-1960s. The 5 original members were lead singer, arranger, and producer Jerry LAWSON, Jesse Sweet Joe Russell, J. Otis Washington, Herbert Tubo Rode, and Jimmy Bro Hayes. Today, the former lead singer of that group, Jerry LAWSON, is at the forefront of a new movement to popularize a cappella music. He has joined forces with Rayfield Ragler, Stan Lockwood, Paul Carrington, and Carl Douglas to create a brand new CD called Jerry LAWSON and Talk of the Town. Here to share with us his lifelong experience with a cappella music is Jerry LAWSON.
Boom, boom, boom. Down, down, dee-da-lown, down, dee-da-lown, down, down, dee-down, down, 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 dee-da-lown, down, dee-da-lown, down, down, dee-down, down, down. My wife came home just the other day. She said, Jerry, I'm in a very bad way. My car won't start, it's falling apart. I was late for work, and the boss got smart. I got a run in my hose, my panty line shows, my hair went flat.
Lord, I hate that.
Hate that.
Jerry LAWSON, welcome to Experience Talks. I'm holding in my hand a really fantastic CD. It's called Jerry LAWSON, Talk of the Town. And the thing that I think is fascinating about this CD is not only is it a good, entertaining musical experience, but I know for a fact that this is the culmination of a lifetime of creativity and artistry and performing. You've really put your heart and your life and your soul into this CD. So I think what I'd like to do is discuss that life and that creativity and how it leads up to this incredible CD. So Jerry, where does it all start for you? I know that you were born in Florida.
I was born in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I was raised up in a small town outside of Orlando, 12 miles north of Orlando, called Apopka. I played sports. I played sports in school. I played basketball, and I was a football star. But my dedication was to music. I was lead singer in my school choir, and I was one of the lead singers in my church choir. My uncle had a juke joint, which was a beer garden. You know, you wasn't allowed to sell liquor, but you could sell beer. And we had in the pot-belly stove, and in the corner there we had a jukebox. And, man, my uncle, he would let me pick the songs that would go on the jukebox. And I would pick the songs because I would listen to a radio station out of Memphis, Tennessee called Randy Record Mart. And I would listen to all the hit songs. And those hit songs, I would tell my uncle, these are the songs we're going to put on the jukebox. And on Saturday night, man, you talking about this joint is jumping. Boy, I had the joint jumping. And because I would listen to the songs on Randy Record Mart, and there was the hit songs, you know. Mm-hmm. Never in my wildest dreams that I thought that the same people that I was putting their music on the jukebox, that I would someday be sharing the dressing room with these entertainers.
What were your wildest dreams back in those days? Did you dream of being a performer? Did you think that you wanted to be a performer? Did you think that it would be a career for you at that time?
It was like a dream, you know. It was something that you talk to yourself about. You know what you do. You sit on the front step at night and look at the stars after listening to Sam Cooke and after listening to Roy Hamilton, you know, and you say to yourself, man, I wonder what kind of life those guys live. Wonder what it's like, man, just, you know, being a Brooke Benton, being a Elvis Presley. How could I even think of one day I would be sitting in the dressing room with Chuck Berry? I'm sitting in the dressing room with Ella Fitzgerald. I'm sitting in the dressing, just talking just like I'm talking to you, John, and I'm talking to Eartha Kitt. I'm sitting and I'm having dinner with Liza Minnelli, and I used to sit there when this was going on. I couldn't say it, and I say to myself, is this the same little guy that was sitting on the stoop out there looking up at the stars? What a life.
When this old world starts getting me down and people are just too much for me to face. Up on the roof. All right, I climb way up to the top of the stairs and all my cares just drift right into space. Up on the roll, Lord. At night the roof is peaceful as can be. Oh yeah, darling, and darling, you can share it all with me. I keep telling you.
How old were you when you went to New York?
I was just out of high school. I was, say, 18, 19.
18, 19, and you showed up, was it on your uncle's doorstep?
I was a fella. He used to go to New York all the time, and I knew that he traveled back and forth. I never knew what he was doing. So my mom's bought me a little TV, and I told him, I said, I'll give you this TV if you take me to New York. And I gave him the TV, and he took me to New York. And I was so excited, and I thought that, you know, he was going to hook me up when I got to New York because he was back and forth. But we got to New York like 4 o'clock in the morning, pulled up on the corner of Fulton and Nostrand. He said, you're in New York, and he put me out. You know, my moms didn't know that I had left Apopka. I had to call my mother and tell my mom. She said, boy, I've been looking for you all over town, and where are you? And I said, Mom, I'm in New York. Boy, if my mother could have got her hand around my neck. She said, in New York? Boy, what you doing in New York? I said, Mom, I just had to come to New York. I just, blah, blah. She said, well, you know, I said, Mom, I ain't even got no money. You know, where you at? And I looked up and I said, I'm on the corner here. It's a sign say Fulton and Nostrand. She said, Fulton and Nostrum. She said, you know, I want you to go 2 blocks over to L Street, and you got an uncle. He lives at 289 L, and you call him. I'm going to call him now and tell him you in New York. And I went, and my uncle came down, and thus started my career in New York, man. My first job in New York was printing the album covers for stars like Johnny Mathis and Nat King Cole, and I was printing the album covers for the stars. I was walking down the street singing on my way to work, and I met another guy, and he said to me, he said, man, you sure can sing. That was Jimmy Hayes. And Jimmy and I, we started hanging out together, and we had our little duet. We used to sing duet. I was a baritone and he was a bass, and we had our little duet. We sounded pretty good, you know, and we sang, Jimmy, you know, man, we ought to go out as a little duet. And from that led to us meeting Joe Russell. Joe was in a group. He wanted to start a group, and Jimmy said, well, won't you let my boy hear? Joe took us to his practice with his group. And Jimmy said, let my boy sing a song. And I sung with that group because I sung up on the roof. They put me out of their rehearsal. They said, you're interrupting our rehearsal. We don't want to, blah, blah, blah. So they put me out of the rehearsal. And Joe, he came out and he said, look, man, I want to meet with y'all Monday night because I'm going to get out of this group. And I think we could start our own group. And me, Jimmy, and Joe got together and we started our own thing, man.
How did you come up with the name, The Persuasions?
We went to the Bible. And reading the Bible, there was a word that kept popping up, and it was persuade. Christ had to persuade people to follow his teachings. And we say, man, if we're going to sing a cappella, what better name for us than The Persuasions?
Boom, 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 boom. All aboard, get on board. All aboard, get on board.
There's a train coming somewhere down the track. The people that ain't ready better step in back. This train has been running since time began. It's running on the love of your fellow man. All aboard, you better get on board.
We was walking down the street one day, and a guy came out of a storefront. And he said, we were singing, and he said, boy, you guys sure sound good, but y'all, you need a job? I said, yeah, we need a job. So he said, well, come on in. And we signed the papers and everything. He said, you guys are going to be surveyors. And I said, surveyors? Man, this is so cool, And we're going to be looking through the little telescopes, that the surveyors look through. But that wasn't the kind of surveyor he was talking about. He was telling us we was going to beat the pavement and asking questions to 1 million people all over Brooklyn. And that's what we did. And the company that we was working for was called Restoration. And it was funded by the Kennedys and the Astors. And we befriended Mr. Frank Thomas, who was the president, and we became the darling of that company. And they would, during the summer months, they hooked it up where we started singing in all 5 boroughs to all of the housing projects over New York. And we honed our craft, and we got pretty good at singing. We had a guitar player, but the guitar player wouldn't show up. And he would get drunk, and every time we had a little gig, we couldn't find him. And people started saying, man, you guys don't need no band. Y'all sound good, man. Y'all sound good without the band, because we would apologize because the guitar player didn't show up. And people would say, man, you guys don't need no band. And we started singing without the band.
It's interesting to me that you didn't actually set out to be an a cappella group, that it just kind of, just Providence sort of turned you in that direction.
Well, we had a really good sound with Howard, the guitar player, because he was a professional. He played just like Curtis Mayfield. That's how good he was. And we was devastated when he didn't show up. He would show up for practice, man, and we would turn the neighborhood out. And then we get a little gig for $25, and here come Howard up the block, so drunk he couldn't stand up. And we did the gig anyway. And people started saying, man, you guys don't need him. Y'all sound good. And what happened was that we was working for the company, the Restoration Corporation. And Mr. Thomas, he said, man, you guys sound good. I want y'all to come to a party that I'm having next Friday night, And we went to the party next Friday night. And who are we singing for but the Kennedys?
That really put you on the map.
That put us on the map, and we started doing all the Kennedys' party. Anytime Kennedys had a party, the Persuasions was there. Martha's Vineyard, we was there. The 3rd Avenue Penthouse up there for $2 million, we was there. We did all of the Kennedy's parties. In fact, we were scheduled to sing at Robert Kennedy's inauguration before he was assassinated. And then from there, the first gig that Restoration got us was opening at Philharmonic Hall for Burt Bacharach and Dionne Warwick. We went out on the stage and we brought the house down, and we got a standing ovation, and thus started our career.
Now, there's an interesting personality involved in your first recording contract. Who was that personality, and how did that come about?
We had a friend. His name was David Dashev, and not a friend. He was our manager. And he heard us, and he came over. He said, look, man, he said, we're going to meet over at the record shop. So we went over to New Jersey, and we met at a record shop. He said, man, I got to let a guy in Los Angeles hear you guys. So he hooked the phone call up and everything, and we got on the phone, and we started singing over the telephone. I just can't work no longer. I got to see my woman right now. And the other guy on the other end of the phone, he said, wow, man, you guys are really good. I haven't heard no harmony like that, you know. And the guy on that other end of that line was Frank Zappa.
I just can't work no longer. I've got to see my woman right now. All right. We ain't getting any younger. I've got to get to a love somehow. All right.
That just started our whole career. We flew out to Los Angeles thanks to Frank, and we recorded our first album on Frank's label. And man, from there, Frank took us on tour with him, and that just, you know, opened the door for us. I've been to every college in the country. I went to Yale, I went to Harvard, I went to every college in the United States. David's idea was to get the college kids behind us, and that was his plan, and that's what worked, because doing that, all the college kids knew Frank Zappa. We were hooked up to that with that name, and playing all the colleges, that just put us out there.
So now we're really up to the 70s, and the 70s is when I discovered you. I was a young college student in the 70s, and that's when I became aware of the brilliance of the Persuasions.
Now, you went to college. Where's this?
I was at Harvard.
Harvard.
I was at Harvard.
Yeah. Well, that was David Dashev. He was from Harvard.
Yeah. Oh, well, there you go. Okay.
Come on, baby, let the good times roll. Come on, baby, let me thrill your soul. Come on, baby, let the good time roll. Roll all night long. Come on, baby, now this is it. This is something I just can't miss. Come on, baby, let the good time roll. Let it roll all night long. Feels so good. Feels so good. When you're home. When you're home. Come on, baby. Come on, baby. Rock me all night long.
How many albums in the 70s did you guys have in the Billboard Top 100? It was quite a large number, wasn't it?
I think we had about 4 or 5.
You had this fantastic career with the Persuasions, but roughly around 2007, 2006, around in there, you made a big decision, and that decision was what?
That decision was to leave the Persuasions and to go out on my own. My whole thing was, I thought that I would never leave the Persuasions, because I wanted to be the one kind of like the one guy that didn't leave the group. You know, I didn't want to be a David Ruffin who's with me, and I got to be very good friends with David and the Temptations, and I wanted to stick with my group. But you know, I got a calling, and I said to myself, I'm never going to ever do the things that I really want to do if I don't just walk away. And we were on our way to Spain, and with Ray Charles, and I called the guys, and I said, look, man, I said, I'm not going to be able to make it, you know. I said, in fact, I think I'm going to do something else. And everybody was very respectful of my decision, and I decided to, you know, to venture out and see what was on the other side of that door.
I'm going to jump way ahead, because ultimately, and I know that you've done a whole lot in between now and then, But ultimately, your career in 2011 brought you to record this fantastic album, Jerry Lawson and Talk of the Town. So let's talk a little bit about this album and why this album is so special to you. How did this album come about?
Listen to this now, John. We were just making arrangements for my debut album was going to be Jerry Lawson with the Moscow Philharmonic. We was flying to Russia. We had contacts, and we had the producer. Everybody was on board to go to Russia and record my first album, Leaving the Persuasions, was going to be Jerry Lawson with the Moscow Philharmonic Orchestra. But God said, no, that's not going to be it. I want Jerry, you're not finished with a cappella until I tell you you're finished. And thus was the album Jerry Lawson and Talk of the Town.
So you met this group of young a cappella singers. They were huge fans of yours, and you decided to blend your voice with theirs and do an album with them. I know that this album, I can feel as I listen to this album, that this is a very special album for you. Can you talk a little bit about that and why it's so special?
It took 2 years of really planning because I said that these are going to be some songs that's got to reflect my career with the Persuasions. It's got to really represent a cappella. I kind of feel like I'm the a cappella representative. So when we sat down and started putting this album together, I started thinking of all the songs that we could do a cappella to make sure that I, being the representative that God chose to go out into the world and preserve this special art. And so I made sure that the songs that we chose for this album was very special. And one song, man, I tell you, I used to get up on the top of a mountain, the Randy Newman tune, He Gives Us All His Love. When I finished recording it, I went up 5 o'clock in the morning to the top of the mountain to listen to the recording. And I mean, I just and I go back and I put a little bit more until Talk of the Town. I said, listen, man, we got to do this because I started thinking about the Five Blind Boys, the Golden Gate Quartet, all of the singers, the a cappella singers that came before me. That's why I feel like I was representing, you know.
We walk with God. We talk with God. Oh, yes, we do. The songs we sing, the music we bring comes from heaven above. He gives us all His love. He gives us all His love. He's looking down on us from up above. He gives us all His love. Oh, Lord.
And so I think that I made the CD of my life when I did the Jerry Lawson and Talk of the Town.
There's one more big chapter in your life that we haven't talked about, this little TV show that was on NBC that reacquainted you with not only your fans, but also created a whole new fan base, a whole young fan base for you. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, you know, one of the producers, Deke Sharon, his group, the House Jacks, Deke was one of the producers of the show. And he called me and he said, Jerry, I had saw the show on TV, you know.
And the name of the show was?
The Sing-Off. I saw the Sing-Off for the first season. And I said, you know, listen to this. This is a cappella. I got a call from Deke Sharon, and he said, hello, Jerry. Deke Sharon from the House Jacks. I said, hey, Deke, how you doing? He said, listen, man. He said, I'm producing one of the producers of the new TV show for NBC called The Sing-Off. I said, yeah, I saw it. He said, listen, I thought, and I feel real bad asking Jerry Lawson. It's like asking Ray Charles to audition. He said, but would you come and audition for The Sing-Off? And I said, well, I better get back to you with this because I would talk this over with my wife. My wife and I sat down and we talked about it. And you know what we said? When God opened doors, you don't close them because you never know what's on the other side. You know, is this below me? No, it's not. You know what I mean? This has got to do with a cappella. It's got nothing to do with Jerry Lawson. This has got to do with a cappella. You want to help preserve this art. You go on down there and get Talk of the Town. Get on down to Los Angeles and audition for the show. Okay, I went down to Los Angeles to audition for the show. It wasn't really an audition. They had already made up their mind. They just wanted to really know what Jerry Lawson and Talk of the Town really sound like, you know. And so we went down, and they put us in, not the audition room, they had us in front of their executives, and they wanted a little private show. So we went and gave them a little private performance, Jerry Lawson and Talk of the Town, and we knocked the socks off. And I think they went back and said, this is our hook for this season, you know. And that just goes to show you how God works in mysterious ways.
And suddenly, these young contestants had a genuine, had genuine a cappella legends in their midst, and it made for some really phenomenal TV.
You know, one of the kids, he said, "Mr. Lawson, what a pleasure." He said, "Man, I got to do my homework." He said, because I didn't know that the Persuasions, was the guys that started this thing. I was listening to rockapella, he said, and so when I got into the show, I found out that what they was really doing, they was honoring the legend. I'm not saying I'm not a legend, but they was honoring my legacy, and they was helping me push this thing along. And, when I talk about God and God opening doors, I got a call just last week, John, from my first producer who produced the a cappella album and We Came to Play, Capitol Records. He's in Hawaii now. He said, "Jerry Lawson," he said, "look, man, let me tell you, I am hooked up down here in Hawaii. I want you to come down here because I got an idea, and this is going to blow the minds of people. I'm not going to go and tell you what the idea is, but it is so heavy that my wife and I right now, we're talking about, we're going to go down to Hawaii, and this is a whole new chapter in Jerry Lawson's life. In fact, I work every day for developmentally disabled adults. And one of my coworkers, I come to find out, he's a rapper. His name is Vader Boy. And so, I've been listening to this kid for a year or so. And so he came in and gave me one of his beats. And the beat is so cool, so I said, you know what, Vader Boy, we're going to go in the studio and put down this side, man. So Vader Boy and we're getting ready to go in the studio. The tune is called Deep Love, and I'm going to sing it, and the Vader Boy is going to do the rapping behind it.
Jerry, it's great to hear that you're still going strong and still doing what you do so well.
God is so good, and it's such a pleasure, and I want everybody to get out there and listen to Jerry Lawson and Talk of the Town and that masterpiece. You'll be listening to Randy Newman, the Dixie Chicks, Dolly Parton and Kenny Rogers, Billy Joel, Sam Cooke, the Andrews Sisters, Marvin Gaye, Pointer Sisters, and we can go on and on because that album, I did it up. I did some stuff that I wanted the kids to get into. Also, it's a tribute on that to the Persuasions, and I wanted the kids to know where the a cappella come from, There's songs on there like, well, I wonder, can't you hear those church bells tolling? And this is old quartet singing. So the album is filled with surprises. In fact, my daughter, she's singing an Isley Brother tune on the CD, and my wife is singing Side by Side. So I just had a good time.
Well, I wonder, can you hear?
Can't you hear? Can't you hear?
Hear those church bells tolling.
Church bells tolling.
Well, I wonder, can you hear?
Can't you hear? Can't you hear?
Hear those church bells tolling.
Church bells tolling.
I wonder, can you hear?
Can't you hear? Can't you hear?
Hear those church bells tolling.
Church bells tolling.
Way over yonder.
Way over yonder.
New burying ground.
Burying ground.
And that's our show. To find out more about our guest, go to the previous guests page on our website. Experience Talks Online is produced by John Semper Jr. and Cynthia Friedlob for the nonprofit Engage, catalyzing the art of active aging. Thanks to Engage founder and executive director Tim Carpenter for making these podcasts possible. And thank you for listening.
Yeah, they kept on rolling.
Kept a rolling, kept a rolling.
Till they rolled.